the Pakistan that exists right now, I don't think it can be reconciled with Mr. Jinnah's vision of how he was, of what he stood for. I was especially struck by the approach that Jinnah had towards the Ahmadi community and how it contrasts with what Pakistan has done to the Ahmadi community. There's this reactionary element within his party who actually wanted Ahmadis to be thrown out of the Muslim League. He refused repeatedly. There's all of these people who declared Ahmadis non-Muslim in 1974, and more or less all of them had opposed the creation of Pakistan. They actually famously called Jinnah Kafir-e-Azam, the great infidel. When Pakistan's idea was put forth, they called it Kafiristan. So they were vehemently against the Pakistan movement. Early on, especially in the first 25 years, the Ahmadi community, because it's an enterprising community, because it's an educated community, it has talented people, really surges ahead.
I just find it so amazing. Like the central political issue in Pakistan since its founding has been Ahmadis.
Well, one of my friends, he said in one of his interviews, the irony is that Pakistan is very much in its genesis an Ahmadi country.
What does a Muslim state look like? Does it look like a theocracy that oppresses its minorities? Or can a Muslim state be one that is humanitarian, secular, and protects minorities? Now, what if I was to tell you that the most powerful Muslim state in the world today was originally set up as a secular country for the protection of minorities? You'd probably say it's impossible, but actually that's the reality. And to discuss that, we have a guest in our studio today, a very special guest, Yasser Latif Hamdani. Welcome to the Rational Religion Show. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
It's an honor to have you. So you're the author of two books on Jinnah, Jinnah, Myth and Reality, and Jinnah, A Life, which I'm reading through at the moment and very much enjoying. And the central figure in all this is Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who was the founder of Pakistan. And that's who we're going to be discussing today. So this is in the context, obviously, of the recent skirmishes between Pakistan and India. And I think for myself, it's raised a question of what really is Pakistan originally? What was it set up to be? And can we kind of justify different states for different peoples? Because that's what it may look like. I think a lot of people, if you're brought up in the West like us, you may see, was this just, again, the old British divide and conquer and trying to create ethno-states, that kind of thing. I don't know if is that something that you considered?
Yeah, absolutely. So people who maybe, I don't think a lot of people understand that Pakistan was set up for the purpose of protection of minority rights, of the Muslim minority of India. And that also it did have clear position on maintaining its own minorities in the constitution, etc. And I don't think that we can really understand even the recent tensions between India and Pakistan unless we understand the history of partition under the formation of Pakistan and the formation of modern-day India, which is why we've invited Yasser Latif Hamdani in today.
Absolutely. And before we come to you fully, we do want to just point out that this is not a partisan or a nationalistic podcast. We are here ultimately to promote peace between all peoples. And to that end, the Caliph of our community, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, he had a message just in his latest Friday sermon. He said he once again wished to draw attention towards prayers regarding the war brewing between Pakistan and India. May peace and harmony prevail, because the weapons used in warfare these days result in the killing of civilians, as is the case in these current circumstances as well. His Holiness said that we should pray that both sides agree to peace and avoid great loss. So, and then he went on to say, if people wish to express anything, it should be a message of peace and harmony. Towards the end of his life, the Promised Messiah wrote a message of peace in which he expressed that there should be peace and harmony, and that this is what every Ahmadi should strive for. May Allah protect all the innocent. Yasser, can I just ask, do you have a kind of reaction to those statements at all of the Caliph? Anything that kind of goes through your mind when you hear that?
I think ultimately that's what's needed, right? I mean, not just for Ahmadis, but the Pakistanis and Indians and, people of the world at large. So I think, and especially the reference to the Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Saab's book, I think that's very important because that's directly, it's actually very relevant to the issue, right? The peace in the subcontinent has to come through that, right? And this reconciliation between Hindus and Muslims, and a realization that there could be Pakistan and India, living side by side, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very timely message.
Yeah.
And it's one that should resonate with a lot of people, not just Ahmadis, I think.
So let's come to Jinnah himself. But I want to ask, what was your interest in Jinnah? Where did your interest as a person kind of come from? Because you're now an expert on Jinnah and someone who has a long track record of standing up for minority rights in Pakistan. But where did this interest come from?
So I was a college student in the US, and there, naturally one comes across Indians, and we got into discussions and debates about partition and whatnot. So I began reading on Jinnah, and American universities, what they do have the most amazing libraries that you can imagine. So they were pretty much every book that was written on Jinnah was there, and so I began reading about Jinnah and realized. That sort of the monochrome figure that we had been taught about in Pakistan, was not what Jinnah was. Jinnah was a very complex human being. He was, and much of his early life, and that's where you sort of get this idea. You can't understand Jinnah's commitment to the idea of Pakistan unless you fully appreciate his commitment to the idea of India.
Okay.
And I know that sounds paradoxical, but he was, so one of the statements he makes very early on, not very early on, as a matter of fact, when he was about 50 years old, he says, somebody asks him if he's what's his identity, and he answers, says, I'm an Indian first, second, and last.
Right.
And so that was his commitment to the idea of Indian nationalism, and then he was famously called by the Congress leaders, he was famously called the best ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity.
Yes.
So Jinnah, in his early years, and when I say early years, I'm talking about, the first 30 years of his 40-year career.
Wow.
So
the majority.
The majority of his life. He was a committed Indian nationalist, committed to this idea of a secular India based on Hindu-Muslim unity.
Yeah.
And that's something that he strived for or was working towards throughout his life.
Yeah.
So unless you understand the commitment that Jinnah had to this idea, you don't begin to understand why he pushed for Pakistan so vehemently in his last 10 years, or last 7 years, I would say. So I think that question really got me interested in Jinnah. And then, I began reading up on him. And at some point, I was going through some medical issues. And so just before I was going into a surgery, one of the Indian publishers reached out, and they're like, if you survive the surgery, you can,
Really?
If you could write this book. I was like, sure, if I survive, I'll write the book.
It was serious surgery then, I presume.
Yes, it was.
It's a really interesting, I think, part of the story to get a call that, you can write this, what has become a definitive book on the life of Jinnah, a person you'd studied so long about and knew so much on. And then to have something so personal kind of potentially intervene and stop that. But obviously you pulled through, alhamdulillah, and you wrote this fantastic book. So if I may?
Yeah.
So I would be really interested to find out also how your research into Jinnah kind of shaped your perspective on Pakistan itself in as it is today. And because people often come to things with preconceptions and then they force their preconceptions upon history. Was it that your study of history informed and changed your view of Pakistan as it is today, and how so?
It certainly did. One of the things that I realized very early on going into Jinnah, I don't think the Pakistan that exists right now, which is a pseudo-theocracy, I wouldn't say it's a complete theocracy, but it's a pseudo-theocracy with, and then there's, of course, the persecution of minorities as well as Islamic sects which are not, which don't conform to this majoritarian idea of, sort of Islam. I don't think it is compatible or it can be reconciled with Mr. Jinnah's vision of Pakistan, of how he was, of what he stood for. And so I do think that research showed. So, I mean, we can get into it if you want me to talk about it. In particular, I was especially struck, and this we'll talk about more, I'm sure. I was especially struck by the approach that Jinnah had towards the Ahmadi community.
Okay.
And how it contrasts with what Pakistan has done to the Ahmadi community. Jinnah was very reticent about defining the word Muslim. He believed that anyone who said he was a Muslim was a Muslim.
Right.
Anyone who professes to be a Muslim is a Muslim.
Yeah.
And so when I found that out, and I, of course, things like, even little things like the fact that Pakistan's first foreign minister was Zafrullah Khan, we didn't learn that much about how Zafrullah Khan was an Ahmadi.
Right.
Or at least didn't make that connection. I actually knew he was Ahmadi, but what I found studying Jinnah was that he had to press back a lot against the, the, not just the orthodox, but there's this reactionary element within his party who actually wanted Ahmadis to be thrown out of the Muslim League. He refused repeatedly, and especially in 1944. And he again said, how can I turn someone out, or how can I declare someone a non-Muslim if they say they're a Muslim?
Yeah.
So I found that, and then, he turned around and he went the other direction. Everybody was asking him, Majlis-e-Arar, for example, we'll talk about Majlis-e-Arar, I'm sure. Majlis-e-Arar, for example, said that they would support Jinnah to the hilt if he would turn the Ahmadis out of the Muslim League. He refused again. He went the other direction. When the issue of the Boundary Commission came up, when Pakistan was being formed, there was the Boundary Commission that was going to decide the borders. And, the question came up, who's going to represent Pakistan at the Boundary Commission? It was like a court.
Yeah.
And Jinnah's natural choice was Zafrullah Khan, And Zafrullah Khan, of course, did a great job. And then he became the foreign minister of Pakistan after that.
Yeah.
So Jinnah actually went the other direction. He, appointed Zafrullah Khan against all opposition, So that, I think, that was something that was very interesting to me. I also... learning about, there's, of course, the fact that Jinnah's vision, one of the things that I also realized, and which is very controversial to state, I think, especially given it's something that cuts against the grain of both nationalisms in Pakistan and India,
right.
Both nationalisms, and that is simply to state that Jinnah's idea of Pakistan, the state that he envisaged, was not necessarily, now what I'm about to say is going to sound a little complicated. It was not necessarily predicated on a partition of India.
Okay.
Jinnah's idea of Pakistan, this Pakistan could have been an autonomous region within a united India.
Okay.
And Jinnah agreed to this idea, and maybe I would go so far as to say that he would have preferred if there was, if nothing else, a confederation between what is now India and Pakistan. So I think very clearly, and this has come out, this like one of the writers that I read, other than Aisha Jalal, who's foremost authority on South Asia and also on Jinnah.
Right.
But another historian I came across was Anil Seal, and their view, and then there was, I shouldn't name all of them, H.M. Sirvai was a great Indian lawyer, author, and jurist. He wrote a book called Partition of India, Legend and Reality. And all of them seem to argue that Jinnah stood for a united India till the very end, that his Pakistan could have coexisted with the idea of a united India. This, to me, was a revelation.
Okay.
It was a revelation because, we'd been taught, and, that goes back to sort of the image of Mr. Jinnah as this indefatigable. Yeah, indefatigable. No, so it is uncompromising advocate for a separate state for Muslims.
Yeah.
I don't think the evidence actually bears that out.
Okay.
He was not. He would have, like I said, even for 30 out of his 40-year career, he had stood for United India.
Yeah.
He was actually looking for a contractual arrangement between two entities, and people had come to see themselves, the Hindus and Muslims had come to see themselves as separate people, and this predates Jinnah.
Of course.
The question was, how do you bridge the gap between them?
Yeah.
I think that even as late as 1946, Jinnah was trying to bridge that gap, and he would have agreed to a united India that was suitably federal, suitably or was at least loosely federated, which would give Muslims a certain degree of autonomy. So something like Canada, for example.
So it seems to me like, in a way, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me like Jinnah, in a way, he wanted first and foremost like a moral reality. And if it had to become a political reality, then it had to. But actually, what he wanted was a kind of, he wanted a setup that had certain moral values and certain protections in place. But he didn't argue for it to take a very specific form of two separate countries. Is that correct?
Exactly. Okay. I think that's the thing. I think he always had this vision of India above what he called Pakistan and Hindustan.
Okay.
That there would be a Pakistan, but and he famously said, even after partition, when India, or what he called with Hindustan, when India took over the name India, Jinnah objected. He said there can't be an India without Pakistan.
There can't be an India without Pakistan.
And yeah, these are his words, and so his idea of this India above Pakistan and Hindustan was there. I mean, he saw India as this bigger entity, and within that, so it was like one compound, many mansions, if that makes sense, at least two mansions, where they could come together, maybe enter into a confederation, maybe a European Union type arrangement, and so that's what he gets, right? I mean, with the cabinet mission plan. I don't know if you know about the cabinet mission plan, but in 1946, the British government sends out a mission which comprises cabinet members from the British government, and they come up and they meet the leaders of India, leaders of Congress and Muslim League and Jinnah, of course, and Gandhi and Nehru and everyone. And they come up with a plan, which is a 3-tiered federation of India. And they outrightly say that there's not going to be a separate Muslim country. We're instead going to make a 3-tiered federation where Muslim majority provinces could have their own constitution, and they would come, and those Muslim majority provinces would then come together with the Hindu majority provinces and have a federation of India. Interestingly, Jinnah accepts it. First opportunity he gets, he accepts it. He accepts the cabinet mission plan. He accepts United India. He says that this is the way to go. He convinces his party, and it looks, for that brief period in the summer of 1946, it seems like,
which is quite late in the day.
Yeah, it's quite late in the day. It's the Congress.
Pakistan was formed a year later.
A year later, yes, and it is the Congress that goes back on that.
Right.
So the conclusion that Anil Seal and H.M. Sirvai and even Maulana Azad, the great Indian National Congress leader, who's of course opposed to Jinnah, they all come to the same conclusion. It was Jinnah who stood for United India. It was the Congress that divided India.
Oh, interesting.
So
I mean, sorry, go on.
No.
So I was wondering. I mean, what I've read about Jinnah is that the issue of Pakistan in particular, and it's still the dividing issue, isn't it, with the recent India-Pakistan war, it was Kashmir. And that actually the rights of the Kashmiris were a flashpoint for the separation of India and Pakistan. Can you talk to us a little bit about, because that issue of Kashmir is more ancient and goes back further than the formation of Pakistan in 1947. Can you take us back, I think, through the historicity of it and take us forward in time from the earliest point through the formation of Pakistan, as to what was the relationship of Jinnah to these issues, and also what was the role played by the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and its Khalifa in particular at the time in both the supporting Pakistan, the formation of Pakistan, and his role with respect to Kashmir, because I think this is an issue that especially Pakistanis have forgotten. And it's very important, I think, for them to recognize their history, because at the end of the day, they have been shaped by it.
Yeah, I think Kashmir, of course, as you know, was a Muslim majority area, which was ruled by a Hindu Raja. And there was a certain amount of oppression that Muslims of Kashmir had to go through. So, of course, the Muslims of the subcontinent responded with the All India Kashmir Committee, which was formed in the 1930s. And, of course, the second caliph of the Ahmadi community was a big part of it. He headed it. Him and Iqbal and, others were part of it. And that, I think, plays into a bigger story of how... So let's just say... Let me say that the role of the Ahmadi community on that issue was particularly, it was definitely something that a lot of other Muslim groups tended to be jealous about,
Okay.
the sort of the, I don't know if that makes sense. They definitely turned against the Ahmadi community as a result, because the Majlis-e-Ahrar, which was a party formed in 1929, it was a party that was sponsored by the Congress party, by Gandhi and Nehru. It was a party.
Really?
Yeah. They were the hangers-on of the Congress from the Khilafat movement. If you're familiar with the Khilafat movement in 1919, Muslims of the subcontinent under the leadership of Gandhi started what is known as the Khilafat movement for the preservation of the Ottoman Empire.
Right.
Or the Ottoman Caliphate.
Under
right?
Gandhi?
Under Gandhi. Gandhi was the leader of it. And he took that issue up because he's like, that way he can mobilize the Muslim masses against the British. That was his objective.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Interestingly, the people who stood against or did not join the Khilafat movement, one of them was Jinnah. And also at the time, there was general sort of sentiment that was expressed in favor of the Ottomans. Obviously, all Muslims did, but people who stood apart or at least away from the Khilafat movement was Jinnah, even Iqbal. Iqbal didn't join the Khilafat movement. The Jamaat didn't join the Khilafat movement.
Well, we had our own Khalifa, so we wouldn't.
So that movement led to the formation of two political parties of Muslims. One was the Jamiyat-e-Ulama-Hind in 1924, and then in 1929 the Majlis-e-Ahrar. Now, Majlis-e-Ahrar in particular, after the issue in Kashmir, which, like you pointed out, is a very central issue. After the Ahmadi, what they viewed as outsized influence of the Ahmadi community in Kashmir, they started organizing or mobilizing against the Ahmadi community in Punjab and elsewhere. Of course, they were backed by the Congress party, which is what makes the whole idea of Congress's inclusive nationalism a little suspect, because they were, they were, and this is one of the things that Nehru, of all people, who we know was a upstanding secular guy. When he writes to Jinnah, he talks about when Jinnah says that recognize the Muslim League as the sole spokesman, as it were, of the Muslim community. He says, how can we? We have the Majlis-e-Ahrar.
Right. Okay, so it's...
And we have the Khaksars and the Majlis-e-Ahrar and all of them. They have a better claim to representing
movements which they were at least partly sponsoring.
Yeah.
Right.
So they have a better claim to representing the Muslims than you do, Mr. Jinnah, who
So just to clarify, so the Indian National Congress was using effectively extremist groups to splinter Muslim unity and to thereby divide it and weaken it in the face of negotiations between the Muslims and the Hindu majority.
Precisely. That's what, at least that's the logic of it,
And that was at a time when actually Jinnah was essentially a unionist as well.
Yeah, he was very much in his mode. He was trying to get Hindu-Muslim unity. He was trying to come up with a pact where they could agree on a system of electorate that could actually satisfy both Hindus and Muslims. So he was at this point trying very much to come to what I would like to call a consociational arrangement between Hindus and Muslims. That was his objective, a contractual arrangement between Hindus and Muslims that would enable them to write a constitution without the majority sort of bulldozing the minority, majority being a permanent cultural majority that the Hindus were, bulldozing a permanent cultural minority.
Yeah.
So against that, he wanted a contractual arrangement that would allow them to write a constitution on the basis of parity between Hindus and Muslims.
Right. So within a united India.
Within a united
And
India.
I find that really interesting because essentially it seems that Jinnah, my impression from this is that Jinnah had a conception of India is that it was the shared heritage of primarily the Muslims and the Hindus together. So it's not that the Muslims were these kind of invaders who just came and they're just squatting. Actually, it was a nation that had been built up, in coordination and cooperation and together with the Hindus, right? So you can't, because this is why he didn't want India to be just the name for Hindustan, because he understood India as being this shared heritage between the Muslims and the Hindus, and that's what he tried to make a political reality. But it seems like this was undermined fundamentally. Is that an accurate assessment?
That is. Just to add to that, I think you've succinctly put it. On 23rd March 1940s, when the Lahore Resolution comes out, a month earlier, Jinnah writes an article for it's called Time and Tide of India, and in which he says that what they're aiming for is the joint governance of the common motherland of Hindus and Muslims.
Right.
So this is just a month before the Lahore Resolution comes. Now, if you look at the text of the Lahore Resolution, it's very clear that it's not a call for anyone who reads it carefully as, putting on, sort of putting on a constitutional lawyer's hat, for example. They can see that the Lahore Resolution, which later was called the Pakistan Resolution, does not talk about partition.
Right.
It does not, it doesn't create, it's not talking about creating, a separate homeland. What it's talking about are independent autonomous regions within a federation, and that sort of one of the key things about that is that I think it's paragraph 3 of the resolution, or the paragraph 4. I think it's paragraph 3, where it refers to a constitution of all of India, and the constitution in that is a singular constitution in singular, not constitutions, but constitution, which basically means that they would have agreed to a united India, and Jinnah was aiming for a sort of a consociational, that's a term that obviously was invented later in the 1990s by a Dutch political scientist, but that perfectly encapsulates where you have a consensus-based democracy that in a divided society. That's what they were aiming at. Now, there's a great book by the principal author of the Indian Constitution in 1950 was Dr. Ambedkar. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. He was the leader of the Dalits. He wrote a very interesting book in 1940 after the Lahore Resolution. It's called Pakistan or Partition of India, in which he lays it down, and he says so very clearly that Jinnah is going to accept something less than a complete partition, and that the Congress should sort of pay heed to it and accept it. Because and that explains sort of the idea of Pakistan. So what I'm trying to say is, I know this is one of those, it goes it completely goes against what we know about partition and stuff, but now I think historians pretty much have come to this conclusion that Jinnah would have definitely settled for something less than a complete partition of India.
That's very interesting, and I think it's. I think we should leave our audience on a bit of hanging for a moment about how it actually ended up in partition, because I feel like we do need to now go back much earlier and discuss sort of the foundations of some of these issues. Can you tell us a little bit about two-nation theory, what that meant, and how that kind of influenced the discourse later on?
So two-nation theory basically, and it kind of plays into this idea. Two-nation theory basically said that Muslims and Hindus are two nations, not that they couldn't coexist.
Right.
That there's a big difference. The subsequent sort of distorted versions of the two-nation theory say that Muslims and Hindus can never coexist. At least that's the sort of the extremist narrative. That's not what it was about.
Yeah.
Two-nation theory merely said that Muslims and Hindus, for cultural reasons, not religious ones necessarily, not theological ones, but cultural reasons like architecture, name, etc., names, for example, they were two nations, their lifestyles, and there's a whole case for why they were legitimately nations, or Muslims were legitimately a nation. Because they were nations, when making a constitution, they should have equal say and not by numbers.
Right.
So Hindus were 3 times as many as Muslims. The Muslim objective, leadership objective, and this starts from the 1860s really, with Sir Syed Ahmad Khan.
Yeah.
The Muslim objective was always to have recognition as a nation and recognition of India as a multinational state.
Okay.
Where if you're making a constitution, you would want consensus, a consensus-based, constitution, and not necessarily a constitution by a majority.
Yeah.
So it was more where the will of the minority was equally important.
Okay.
So so two-nation theory is very interesting. I think it's it's very important to look at what the two-nation theory meant to not just Jinnah, but Sir Syed Ahmad Khan before him, and great men like Sayyid Amir Ali and all of these people. It was not, first and foremost, the most important point I would make about the two-nation theory is that it was not theocentric.
Right.
And again, that sounds counterintuitive to what we've learned, that, obviously we're talking about a religious community being a nation, but that was not theocentric. They were, let me try and put it this way. There were as many atheists who were part of the Muslim nation as they were not,
Okay.
if that makes sense. Because, so how do I explain that?
Well, you mean it wasn't a theological matter?
It was
a matter
not
of culture,
exactly. Language, yes,
and upbringing and
and
the rest of it.
names, for example, right? I mean, one of the things that when Gandhi gets off his ship from coming from South Africa in 1915, he's welcomed by Jinnah, and Jinnah, of course, was famously, at least publicly, known as irreligious. He was not someone who, there's nothing, he wouldn't pray, wouldn't follow rituals and stuff. All of that is well known about Jinnah. And the first thing Gandhi says when he's, speaking in response to Jinnah's address of welcome, he says, "I'm so glad to see a Mohammedan presiding over the
Welcome party.
The welcome party." He, instead of identifying Jinnah as a fellow Indian, he was identifying Jinnah as this Mohammedan, right, as a Muslim. So I think that itself is the basis of the two-nation theory, where they saw each other as different people. And by the time, and there was some implicit recognition. Now, two-nation theory itself came from the Aligarh school, which basically, by arguing that Muslims were a nation, were arguing for greater political recognition and greater political participation of Muslims in sort of the, in the legislature. And
Aligarh University was like the premier Muslim educational establishment.
Exactly.
By Sir
Syed Ahmad Khan. So what I want to say is that the Pakistani state, especially after the 70s and the 80s, began to define the two-nation theory as theologically driven.
Okay.
You know.
So you mean 1980s retrospectively looking back at
Looking
the
back
Tunisian
at
theory? Okay.
Yeah, so they're looking back and they're saying that it was theological.
Yeah.
And that, and then of course that but that doesn't gel in with the fact that, like I said, I mean, for example, one of the biggest supporters of the Pakistan movement or the Muslim League were the Communist Party of India. The Communist Party was a major supporter of the Muslim League and the Pakistan movement. You know, so they didn't support the Muslim League or the Pakistan movement because it was a theologically driven movement. They saw it as a question of right of self-determination for a cultural minority, a cultural nation.
Because a majoritarian rule here may end up oppressing the minority. And I guess in a way, for me, it seems like it's something which one does not have to believe in a certain religion in order to understand that these are two nations culturally. So it's religiously neutral from the observer perspective. And even though the cultural differences, so the cultural identity may have at its root religious differences, which formed over time cultural differences, the nationhood question is based on those cultural differences rather than on the religious beliefs of the observer or the specific theological beliefs of some adherents of those communities. Is that roughly what?
That is precisely what I'm saying.
Okay.
And that's what I mean when I say two-nation theory was not a theologically driven thing, and which is why the question of Muslim or who is a Muslim was kept vague. At least kept to this idea. Jinnah's idea was anyone who says he's a Muslim is a Muslim.
That was also what Prophet Muhammad said, funnily enough.
So that is an Islamic position.
He said, write down for me the name of all those who call themselves Muslim in the first census of Medina.
Yeah. With you saying that, it reminded me of this passage from the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Because actually, during this time, it was a very dynamic time politically and religiously. The Ahmadiyya community was founded in this time, in 1889, by Hazrat Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, its founder. And actually, his final book, Pagham Masul, A Message of Peace, was essentially about a religious reconciliation between Muslims and Hindus. And it opens essentially with this passage. He says, I now draw your attention to the following. Notwithstanding the hundreds of differences between us, Muslims and Hindus alike share one thing in common. We all believe in God, the creator and master of the universe. Also, we belong to the same denomination of God's species and are referred to as humans. Furthermore, we are inhabitants of the same country. We are mutual neighbors. This requires that we become friends to each other with purity of heart and sincerity of intentions. We should dispose kindly to each other and be mutually helpful. In the difficulties pertaining to religious and worldly matters, we should exercise such sympathy towards each other as if we have become limbs of the same body. And he went on to essentially say that the differences stem from a lack of a universalist perspective on both sides of the Muslims and the Hindus. And what he was arguing for within the Muslim body was that actually Islam recognizes that the founders of all the major religions, including Hinduism, and that many of their holy men were actually true people, true recipients of revelation, and true prophets. So this was an interesting. I just think that's very relevant because it's kind of recognizing that there are two nations here. But it's not. But that recognition does not mean that we should therefore fight each other and be at loggerheads with each other. That there is a chance for peaceful relations, and that should be sought, even from a leading Muslim figure of the time, a religious figure of the time, no less.
That stems ultimately out of the recognition of that these are, in a way, that they are the children and the offspring and the followers of people who were true in themselves and were close to God. And I think that's such an amazing point, because even if you look at adjacent conflicts in the world, like the conflict in Palestine, for example, and the awful barbarity that's going on over there, a large part of that is driven from a kind of religious fascist perspective, from the Zionist perspective, which is that they are the recipients of God's pleasure, they are the recipients of God's revelation, all other revelations are false, right? And that they are the chosen people of God, and God gave them this land, and therefore it ultimately inherently dispossesses the Palestinians of their rights over the land because they are lesser, right? and this inability to see the universalism of which Islam actually, is the only religion of all the religions to teach that every nation has been sent a warner, every nation has been sent a messenger.
Yeah.
Because God's not at the end of the day just going to favor the children of Abraham and forget everybody else He's created.
Yeah.
And yet sometimes I think, especially in the case of Pakistan, I suppose the great lament is that the Pakistanis and the way that Pakistan has gone has neglected this fundamental aspect of Islam.
And just before I come back to you, for me, there's he argues this beautifully theologically, because he says the pretty much the first sentence of the Quran is Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Allah is Lord of all the worlds, all the nations, all the peoples, and therefore He has not neglected any of them with revelation. And he actually makes a comparison between the Hindus believing that religion only came to them, but the Jews believing that religion only came to them. Yeah, but he also extends it to the Zoroastrians and others. Yeah. But actually, Islam came with a very universalist perspective, which I think is quite beautiful from a religious perspective. At the same time, he did advocate for the Muslims to seek political representation and for them not to leave this in the hands of others, and they should also act in the world as well. Yes. Because in Islam, there's a general principle that you pray and you act. You have your religious convictions, but you also seek to
engage with reality.
The reality that God has created. And that kind of brings me to, this was 1908, this was written. And Jinnah at this time, or maybe just after this time, was he was in Congress, if I understand, and he was quite a staunch unionist. So can you take us through the sort of 20s, if you may, or the 10s and the 20s, and how Jinnah evolved in that period?
Yeah, so of course at this time, and from 1908, if you were to take it later on, when Jinnah leads the Muslim League and the Congress into the Lucknow Pact, he's hailed widely as the best ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. Gokhale calls him that, and then Sarojini Naidu, another major Indian figure, calls him best ambassador of Hindu-Muslim unity. So Jinnah is pretty much sort of leading this constitutionalist sort of moderate wing of the Congress, which is aiming at constitutional advance to an extent where there would be self-rule for Indians within the British Empire, so it would become like Australia or Canada or something like that. So they're working towards that. They're pressing back against the British bureaucracy. In comes Gandhi, in 1919, 1915 actually, but sort of he takes on the mantle, starts the non-cooperation movement, starts the civil disobedience, and also began patronizing the Khilafat movement and sort of the religious classes and I think that's where the break between Gandhi and Jinnah comes. They're working together in the Congress earlier, but Jinnah's like, you don't, this is you're encouraging extremism. So, and he said famously that you're bringing in unwholesome elements of the Muslim community to the forefront, which is going to end up dividing Hindus and Muslims, turning them against each other. And he says your methods, he famously writes this letter, he says your methods have turned not only Hindus and Muslims against each other, but they've turned fathers and sons against each other.
Wow.
So that's when he quits the Congress party.
When is that?
That's in 1920.
Okay.
And
so Gandhi was a promoter effectively of Islamic extremism at the time, or
sectarianism,
or I shouldn't say Islamic extremism among Muslims.
Yes, I very much so, and very much, and also Gandhi was complicated. I think one of the things that he talks about, on the one hand, he's doing this, he's supporting the Khilafat movement and I think one of the things he did, he trusted the religious elements within the Muslim community more than what he saw as the sort of the secular, westernized Muslims like Jinnah, for example. He trusted implicitly, trusted the mullahs, more.
Really?
Yeah, I get that feeling once you look at sort of the Khilafat movement. That's what he did. But the other thing was that Gandhi was also using rhetoric that was sort of abrasive in a sense. He famously called for Ram Rajya or Ram Raj, and now while he might have,
what is that?
What does that mean?
So the rule of Ram.
Okay.
Oh wow!
Ram Raj. Okay.
Ram Raj.
Yeah, fine. King Raj.
So
King Ram. Sorry.
Yeah. So Ram Raj, as in the rule of Ram, And so that is a, that's the rallying cry for all Hindu supremacists in any event. Now Gandhi probably meant it in sort of, how he meant it. He meant it maybe as if, the rule of Ram was the most ideal thing. So he just meant a just society or something like that,
Okay.
and that's the, so the positive thing that one, can imagine, the benefit of doubt that one can give Gandhi.
Yes.
So on the one hand, he was talking about Ram Raj or Ram Rajya, as he called it. And on the other hand, he was, supporting the Khilafat movement. I think this thing, and Jinnah, when he broke away from Congress, said, I don't have anything to do with this mixing of religion with politics.
Right. Oh, wow.
So that
so
turns,
interesting.
so that turns Jinnah against the Congress party, and he still continues to work with them.
But what actually drives the founder of Pakistan out of the Congress is mixing of religion and politics.
Yes.
Wow, that's extraordinary, actually, the way you put it.
Wow. Okay. And what happens next? What does he do next?
So he's still working for, in the 20s, he continues to work for a Hindu-Muslim unity pact, because he's obviously the architect of the 1916 pact, which is the Lucknow Pact. He's trying to resurrect that.
What is? Can you just briefly tell us what that is? The Lucknow Pact. You mentioned it before.
Yes. So the Lucknow Pact is where the Congress and the Muslim League came together, and they said that there are certain. So the Congress would recognize the Muslim need to have reserved seats.
Okay.
And separate electorates in return for Muslim support for their campaign for self-rule.
Okay, so basically the deal was the Muslims can have their own elections amongst themselves, essentially, amongst Muslim majority areas. Is that how it would have played out? Where they could then have a certain number of representatives that represent them in the wider parliamentary structure, whatever it would be, in return for independence. So the Muslims were helping all of India to get independence, but in return they wanted to make sure that they had official representation, so that I guess
In the new India.
Yeah, in the new India. So
they didn't want a new India, British go, and then
it's
they
rule of-
extremism against Muslims.
Yeah.
Yeah, precisely.
Okay. So he had previously negotiated that, right?
Yeah, he did.
And then he leaves Congress, and then in the 20s he's trying to resurrect that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's trying to, sort of bring the constitutionalists together. He forms a party, or at least that party becomes known as the Independent Party or the Independent Liberal Party within the legislature. So he's still working for that. And he's pressing the government or the British government to come up with. He's also fighting against, pushing back against the British for things like the Press Act and sort of, this in the aftermath of the war, the British government has come down pretty hard on sort of, civil liberties and stuff.
Okay.
And
World War One.
Yeah, World War One.
Why do they come down so hard against it?
Well, because they saw the Gandhian movement and everything picking up. They see it as an extremist movement.
Okay.
And so they're trying to come down hard on the press.
Right.
And that's your sort of the Rowlatt Act, which comes out. So Jinnah is actually fighting against all of these things in the legislature, and he's pushing back against the government, but he's trying to resurrect this pact now. In the meantime, the Gandhian movement takes a life of its own. It becomes, one of the largest protest movements or, civil disobedience. And what the British do, they keep delaying the idea of self-government for India, because every time these people, the constitutionalists like Jinnah and others, they go to the British and say, give us self-rule, they're like, we're not going to talk to you because, Gandhi's got all the people with him.
Right.
And he wants to throw us out. So we're not going to talk to you, give you self-government unless you resolve that problem.
Okay.
So that ultimately, sort of leads to the delay of, constitutional advance. Ultimately, it comes down to the 1930s where, ultimately, first the British send out the Simon Commission, which is looking in 1927, actually. Which is, an all-white commission looking at constitution making. It is boycotted by every party, including Jinnah, because it's all white and doesn't take into account, the opinions of locals. Then in 1930s, the roundtable conferences start, and that's again Jinnah's contribution. He convinces Lord Irwin, the Viceroy of India, to hold a conference of Indian leaders who could then decide on a constitution of United India. Around this time, Jinnah also gives his 14 points. These are 14 points. These are consolidated, irreducible minimum Muslim demands for a united India. In which there are things like, there's the question of religious freedom, question of reserved seats. He also talks about, so one of the points says that they can be separate electorates for now, and but it would be open to every community who wants to give up separate electorates can give up separate electorates. So all of these things are posited. They put forth.
But he initially wasn't for separate electorates.
He wasn't for.
He was for united, all Hindus and Muslims on the same ballot.
Yeah, he was originally. Jinnah opposes the separate electorates. He sees the separate electorates as a means of dividing Indians. But and he ultimately comes to see it as a necessary evil, which is necessary because Muslims just don't have representation, right? There's no chance Muslims are going to win. And I think in retrospect, when you look back at it and look at the composition of assemblies later on, it's very clear that while joint electorates is generally a better idea, but without separate electorates, Muslims wouldn't have gotten any representation.
Right.
I understand it was the second Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in particular who recognized that reality of necessity of separate electorates and persuaded him upon this matter. Exactly.
Mirza Bashiruddin Mahmud Saab goes and talks to him, and this is in Delhi that they meet, and he explains to Jinnah the Muslim position. That's one of the other things that they collaborate on. So this is in 1927. There's this one issue of separate electorates that he convinces Jinnah of, and the other thing is the response to the blasphemy against Prophet Muhammad that's going on, right?
Okay.
So Mirza Saab goes and talks to Jinnah about it, and then they ultimately bring together a law. Not just them. There's a law that the British government brings with certain changes that Jinnah says, and that's the 295A.
Yeah.
Which is a very compared to the blasphemy laws of Pakistan now. It's a very fair law. It criminalizes scurrilous attacks on the lives of founders of all religions.
Right. What was the context? Why was the need felt for that?
There was the pamphlet was between Hindus and Muslims in Punjab. By this time taken a really ugly turn. There was a blasphemous book against the Holy Prophet
and his wives.
Yes. And this leads to a lot of violence in Punjab. So the British government is responding to that because there's no law to stop that kind of intercommunal conflict that arises out of, publication, for example. Now, what Jinnah says at this point is that, fine, if you want to make a law, but make sure the academic criticisms of religion are not stifled.
Right.
So this is what he says at this point. But this is what the context is. But there was collaboration on this law between the Ahmadi community, the head of the Ahmadi community, and Jinnah as well.
So it's actually a law. It's interesting, a few aspects of that, which is that it's essentially stopping incitement to hatred and violence.
Exactly.
While allowing academic criticism. But it's also universalist as well, because is it a general law against these attacks on all religious founders?
All religious founders, not just Muslim, all religious founders, and it's a law to bring establish peace, right? I mean, the pamphlet wars in Punjab are, when you look at the Hindu-Muslim relations, they're the worst. I mean, you've got attacks, and even if you go further back, I mean, this is one of the concerns that the founder of the Ahmadi community has against Hindus. Their constant blasphemous writings against the Prophet.
Right.
So, I mean, very early in 1880s, his first Brahim Ahmadiyya part 1-2, he talks at length about refuting the Arya Samaj writings against the founder of Islam. So after the Second Roundtable Conference in 1932, Jinnah leaves politics. What caused that kind of despair? And when did he come back, and why did he come back?
Yeah, so he leaves politics, or at least leaves politics of India. I mean, at one point he did try to enter parliament in the UK.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he tried.
How did he do?
But no, so he went to the. So it's interesting. I mean, he went to the Labour Party, and
Very new then.
Yeah, so they was very new. The Labour Party rejects him because they're like, he's too well dressed. They're like, we're not going to have, so the words that they're like, we're not going to have a toff like that.
Okay.
So that's what they say about him. So then he
Gujarati man from India.
Yeah, so he's like obviously very well dressed and sort of more British than the British, and he's like they reject him for his choice of clothes. Then he goes to the Conservative Party, because his objective is to go into the British Parliament and talk for India, sort of get
very noble actually.
Yeah,
he seems to be consistently trying to advocate for his people essentially.
Yeah, so when he goes to the Conservative Party, they say he's too liberal.
Right.
He's too left wing, and which is true because he's a member of the Fabian Society as well, so he's like, so he has no place being in Conservative Party. He tries, but they, so he's basically rejected by both parties during this time. So in any event, he's one of the reasons why he's like, he feels, and he says so to a number of his friends, he's like, the problem with India is they're only Hindus and Muslims and no Indians, that's what he says to his friends. And so he's obviously after, so one of the things that happened in 1929 when he finally takes a proposal, these are known as the Delhi proposals, where he agrees to sort of for certain safeguards, he agrees to supporting the Congress plan for a united Indian constitution. And that those proposals are rejected. So at this point, he thinks that there's no hope for Hindu-Muslim unity. So he goes and settles down in England.
Okay, so he feels like he's lost.
He's lost, yes, and he just basically he's practicing before the Privy Council in London.
He was a barrister.
He's a barrister, yes, and he's working, and that's what he sort of that's what he's doing for the next 3 or 4 years. Until he's persuaded to go back, and he needed some persuasion there because he didn't want to go back. And that's where the Ahmadi community comes in. I'm sure the thing. It's the Imam of the London Mosque, which is known as the Al Fazl Mosque. The Fazl Mosque, not Al Fazl Mosque. A.R. Dard. He goes and convinces Jinnah to come and first speak at the mosque, and that's where Jinnah announces that he would be, going back to India. So that's where sort of he goes back.
And he mentions, doesn't he, that it was the persuasion of the...
Yeah, the eloquent persuasion of the Imam.
And I believe the Imam was he was put on the case by the second Khalifa.
He was, yes. And
to convince him to come back.
Yeah, so that's when he goes back and takes on, the reins of the Muslim League, starts organizes it, on the lines of the Congress Party, and goes into elections.
So that's quite pivotal because essentially he gives up. He feels all is lost. It's a classic narrative. All is lost, and then the second Khalifa presumably feels, just from the way it played out, presumably he must have felt no one else can lead Pakistan to can lead the interests of the Muslims politically in the way that it needs to be done, like Jinnah. Is that correct?
That is correct.
There's no other particular candidates that are
of that stature, of that capability, probably.
Okay. Yeah, there are very few other people. I think the only other person that one can think of is Sir Fazli Hussain, who was in Punjab. He was also a barrister, but he passes away in 1936.
Right.
So he's no longer there.
And any Ahmadi, I guess, will be excluded by the controversy amongst the Muslims as being a representative, presumably.
Yeah, presumably. Though I must say at this point, Zafrullah Khan heads up, presides over several sessions of the Muslim League.
Okay.
So he's seen as this. He's one of the representatives of the Muslims at the Roundtable Conference.
Right.
Okay.
So he was another potential candidate, but being Ahmadi would have been difficult.
Yeah.
And Jinnah had all these capabilities. So the Seventh Khalifa, through Imam Darad, convinces him to come back. He comes back with, one assumes, a kind of renewed vigor and hope. And what does he do next? How do we get to 47? Basically? Is this 34? When is this? Sorry,
It comes back in 34.
Okay, 34 to, let's say, Second World War. What's kind of going on?
Yeah, so he
that's 1 year, mate.
34 to 39.
Oh, to 30, no, sorry, I do apologize.
So he as soon as he comes back, he begins to sort of reorganize the Muslim League, modernizes it. Muslim Leagues previously simply a soapbox for speeches and stuff. Now he makes it into a...
It's a podcast. I'm sick of them.
Yeah, so he makes it into a proper political party, and they contest the elections in 1937 in alliance with the Congress, by the way.
Right.
So they're allied to the Congress, and they contest elections. Now, what happens in these elections is that they only win in Bombay and UP. That's where Muslim League wins. It loses elections in Punjab and Bengal, which are the most Muslim majority areas. And at this point, Jinnah calls out to the Congress and says, let's have a united front against what are seen as pro-British, pro-government parties, the Unionist Party in Punjab and so on and so forth. But the Congress is like, so they begin negotiations. Jinnah says that recognize us as the Muslim League, recognize the Muslim Leagues as the spokesperson for all Muslims.
Yeah.
And the Congress refuses. Congress says, we won't recognize you because there are other political parties, other Muslim parties like the Majlis-e-Ihrar, like the Khaksar, who have a better claim to representing Muslims than you do.
Yeah.
So that's what Nehru says. And so there isn't, but there was an opportunity. I think Maulana Azad mentions it in his book. There was a great opportunity for Muslim League and Congress to come together had they formed united governments in or unity governments in UP and Bombay. That would have changed the course of history.
Right.
That for all practical purposes, Congress and the Muslim League would have become the same party. Instead, the Congress rejects this offer of cooperation, and Nehru tells Jinnah that you have to, in order to be taken seriously, you have to rely on your inherent strength.
Yeah.
So Jinnah writes back. He's like, from now on, we'll only rely on our inherent strength.
Oh, wow.
And that's when he starts to sort of, take on the Muslim community, and begins to mobilize them and organize
What
them.
about Maulana Azad at this time? Was he part of Congress?
He was part of Congress. So he starts,
But he was trying to represent the Muslim interests from within Congress.
Yeah. So originally he was, so this is the sort of the, so Jinnah and Maulana Azad, their careers kind of run parallel, but in the other direction. He started off in the Muslim League, and then ultimately joined the Congress and turns against the Muslim League, whereas Jinnah starts in the Congress and goes into the Muslim League. So, that's sort of Maulana Azad. By the way, Maulana Azad is especially important because he's the one who's, sort of organizing the Muslim parties. The Ihrar and the Jamiyat-ul-Ulama-e-Hind.
Yeah.
He's their go-between, for the Congress leadership.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So he's definitely sort of, he has this pivotal role. But for the Muslim League, or at least for Jinnah, he's just a showboy, right? He's sort of a token Muslim,
I see.
for that the Congress has. So that's what he rejects him as that.
And Jinnah himself is still partial to unity.
Yes.
So this whole caricature of him as this kind of radical separatist is just not historical.
It's not historical. No,
Right.
it's been rejected by all serious historians now.
Right.
I like I said, there's a whole school of history, Cambridge School, it's known as. It's looked at partition again, and they've concluded that Jinnah would have agreed to a united India. Given enough safeguards and given enough, protections for Muslims, he would have agreed to a united India.
Okay. So we're then at Second World War, and what happens? How does the Second World War play out in India, and how does that have an influence on the politics of independence?
Mm-hmm. So 1940 is when. So 1939 is when, of course, the war starts, and then the Congress is in government right now.
Right.
And Congress is like suddenly faced with this thing where they're being pushed into or taken into the war. And they say we are not going to. They refuse. They're like,
wow.
They're like, we're not going to support the British war effort unless we are, we are allowed. And so Muslim League initially, Jinnah supports them, but when it comes, so they start their Quit India movement, and Jinnah says, no, it's not. We're not going to blackmail the British during the war.
Yeah.
So that's where, sort of...
Very principled, my goodness, for something he's worked for 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives up quite a powerful potential instrument.
Leverage,
on the basis of a principle.
Mm-hmm.
Not to cast aspersions, but it seems like Congress will use using any leverage possible to further their aims. Is that reasonable?
I think so. I think not just that, but Congress is continuously learning from the British overlords in terms of trying to divide the Muslims in order to get what they want.
Right.
As with Majlis-e-Ahrar and so on and so forth. They're constantly looking for partners within the Muslim community who don't follow Jinnah's lead and don't follow the Muslim League.
And the Majlis-e-Ahrar, they were not for, in the end, from what I understand, a separate Pakistan.
They were not for a separate. They actually famously called Jinnah Kafir-e-Azam.
Oh, really?
The great infidel, and when Pakistan's idea was put forth, they called it Kafiristan, so they were vehemently against, sort of the Pakistan movement.
Right. Which makes sense as to why Congress would want them more as the spokespeople of the Muslim community, ultimately.
Exactly.
Because it aligned with their interests and what they were going for.
Exactly. And Majlis-e-Ahrar, of course, is also notorious for its campaigns against Ahmadis. I'm sure they're the ones who are like, sort of continuously pressing. At one point they suggest to Jinnah, they offer Jinnah that if he works to get the Ahmadis declared non-Muslim at the central legislature in India, they would support the Muslim League in their demand for Pakistan.
Wow. And he rejects it.
He rejects it.
So it's really interesting because in a way, holding on to Ahmadiyya, he wasn't an Ahmadi, he was a Shia, but holding on to the concept of the rights of everybody to profess their own faith, as epitomized in particularly with the issue of Ahmadis, it was like holding on to a burning coal for Jinnah. And had he given up that burning coal, then he would have been given everything he would have wanted. Apparently, on the face of it. And his continuing to hold it in spite of the obvious political disadvantages to doing so actually is what kind of paved the way, in a sense, for him to be the leader of all Muslims. Because had he, in a way, given up the Ahmadis, then he may have lost the Shias. He may have lost other communities as well along the way before he got to the formation of Pakistan, which would have meant he would never actually be the spokesperson for the Muslims, which is the irony. And it kind of goes to a point in general about life, which is, actually holding on to your principles ultimately does yield the greatest benefits. Holding on to the righteous principles does yield the greatest benefits, and it gave him a level of authenticity and authority which nobody could challenge, I guess.
It's just remarkable, actually, that he continuously gave up leverage for the sake of principles, while for most of his career trying to have a united India, and yet he ends up being the founder of Pakistan.
So how does that...
how does that transition happen? So we're in World War II. How does that, towards 47, 48, how does that play out?
So it basically, obviously the war goes on, and ultimately the elections come across about, sort of the elections for 46, 45, 46. I know it's jumping. So it's 1945 that the provincial elections happen, 1946 early when the central legislature elections come. And Pakistan becomes an election issue.
Right.
So they campaign on the basis of Pakistan. The Muslim League wins. Remember, it's separate electorates.
Yeah.
Muslim League wins all the Muslim seats, primarily, almost all of them.
Yeah.
95% of the seats.
Wow.
Including the Punjab?
Including
It's
the
a
Punjab.
massive rise in 10 years.
Yeah, exactly. It is complete reversal of fortunes. So at this point, now the question of what the future is, that's when we talked about the cabinet mission plan, that's when the cabinet mission comes, and comes up with this idea. And like I said, Jinnah accepts the cabinet mission plan. Cabinet mission plan is torpedoed by Nehru, who says that they're going into the legislature unfettered by any agreements.
Can you explain to us a little bit again about the cabinet mission plan, just for people's clarity?
Yeah, so the cabinet mission plan is a 3-tiered federation. That's the idea, where there would be the provinces, and then on top of the provinces would be the group legislatures. So Muslims could form a group of their own, Muslim majority provinces, and the Hindu majority provinces could form a group of their own. Muslim majority provinces could call their group Pakistan. Then the groups would come together as United India.
Okay, so is that initial kind of vision, that aim to have a united India with Hindustan and Pakistan?
Exactly.
And even to get to that point, if I remember correctly, actually there was it in the Punjab? Was it certain there was a particular Muslim area which wasn't Muslim League and had a different party. And from what I remember, the Second Khalifa was, or the Ahmadiyya community rather, was instrumental in getting them to give up to basically cede to the Muslim League. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I'll tell you what happened essentially was, so Muslim League had won the Muslim seats, almost all of them, in Punjab as well.
And which year was this? Which election?
1945-46.
Okay.
Now, what the Congress did, it cobbled together an alliance with the Unionist Party, which was, sort of a much, gotten some Muslim seats.
This was a Muslim party as well.
This was a Muslim party, right? This was a pro-British Muslim party.
Yeah.
So Congress gets into an alliance with them, the Unionist Party. Unionist Party, is a cross-communal party, so it has Hindu and Sikh legislatures as well. They get together, they join up with the Sikh Party, and they cobble together a coalition government, which keeps Muslim League out of power.
Okay.
And it's a very weak unity government that they have. Muslim League is out of power. So it is there that Khizr Tiwana, who's, sort of the chief minister or the premier, as it was called, of Punjab, he's ruling. So the second head of the Ahmadiyya community asks Sir Zafrullah Khan to convince Khizr Tiwana to give up, and allow the Muslim League to make the government there. That happens, and that's how the Muslim League government comes into, or forms government in Punjab in 1947.
That's a massive win.
That's
enormous. I mean, Punjab was the most populous state in India, I understand.
Yeah, it was.
And for Muslims in particular.
Okay, so now that the Muslim League has consolidated the Muslim vote under them, or Muslim representation, then we come. So no one can gainsay Jinnah's party as not being the representative, right?
Yeah.
So then is this when we have the cabinet mission plan?
The cabinet, yes, and
which he agrees to.
Which he agrees,
and which is not a separate Pakistan.
It's not a separate.
It's Pakistan. A federal Pakistan with a Hindustan under a united India.
A federal united India.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happens to that?
And
this is 47 now. We're talking
46.
46. Okay.
46. Yes. So in the cabinet mission, so after the cabinet mission plan, Congress also accepts it, and then Nehru in July. So all of this happens in May and June of 1946. In July, Nehru makes a statement, very famously says, "We're going into the legislature or the Constituent Assembly and we're going to make a constitution unfettered by any agreement that we might have.
So Congress accepts it, and then Nehru rejects it.
Well, he says it doesn't matter what we did before. It's unfettered by any agreement that we previously made.
Yeah. So that's and basically he says, so he basically scraps it, right? I mean, he renounces the whole idea. And at this point, Jinnah's like, so this goes on for another 6 months after that. This happens in July. There's another question of the formation of groups and how they would come about. This goes back, the Jinnah and Nehru and the Governor General, the Viceroy, Lord Wavell, traveled to London in December, and to come to an arrangement. Again, the effort fails because Congress is like, no, we are not going to allow formation of groups on Muslim League's terms. Which is basically what brought the Muslim League to Cabinet Mission Plan, which Jinnah had sold to his people, saying that we are accepting the Cabinet Mission Plan because we will get groups.
Yeah,
we will get a group federation, which would be a Pakistan within India.
And Congress had agreed to that.
The Congress says it didn't agree.
No, but had they previously?
They did. They said they accepted the Cabinet Mission Plan, but there is a question of interpretation now. And so in December, they refuse. And ultimately, at this point is when sort of Jinnah and the Muslim League return to or revert to the idea of a separate federation altogether.
Basically as a last resort then.
Yeah.
Because they have tried to go through every means of keeping a united India. They've essentially been undermined in I think, our perspective. And then there's no other choice. Is that fair?
Exactly. The British, in one of their reports, say that even in March 1947, had Congress agreed to the interpretation that the British government and Muslim League had given to the Cabinet Mission Plan. Had the Congress agreed to it, and had the Congress accepted that when they make the Constitution, they'll keep the Cabinet Mission Plan as part of it, as sort of the template on which to make the Constitution, Jinnah would have given up the demand for Pakistan. So that's in March 1947.
Right. That is so significant. And I think, it speaks to me now looking back, hearing this and looking back, and I imagine it must have spoken to Jinnah and the Muslim representatives all the more strongly that if even in these negotiations, the Congress was going back on their word and not allowing representation of the Muslims in the way that they want, then that speaks to the fact that as rulers of a majoritarian united India with just a normal parliamentary democracy without separate electorates, it seems likely that actually the considerations of the Muslims and the rights of the Muslims won't be taken into account. Because even in negotiations, they're not being taken into account. Is that what the interpretation was at the time? Yeah, and that was the fear, right? That's what because you see, when we look at Jinnah holistically, and it's sort of his disillusionment with the idea of Indian nationalism and this idea of one man, one vote democracy, direct, franchise without any safeguards, without any constitutional safeguard, that comes up after he sees that as there is more democratization, there's also a rise in communalization of the discourse. So he sees there's more block voting, there's more block considerations. Exactly, and he sees the rise of parties like Hindu Mahasabha and also, remember, he views Gandhi's use of religion in politics as sort of problematic for the future of India. So by this time, this is the fear. In 46, 47, those fears are confirmed. Especially confirmed when he basically, you see, after having championed the demand for Pakistan, or sort of having asked for Pakistan for 6 years now, he says we don't need Pakistan, we'll accept the Cabinet Mission Plan. He had to bend over backwards to get his party on board. And once he does that, the Congress goes back on its word. So he sees that's the only solution that is left. Okay, and then what happens? How does it transition into the actual creation of Pakistan? What has happened there?
Yeah, so then what happens is there are several plans that come out. The final plan, the Mountbatten plan, comes out. Mountbatten becomes the Viceroy and Governor General. He comes up with the plan, the partition plan, which is, and remember when we talk about the word partition, we're not talking about partition of India, because remember, India as an entity, as a political entity, didn't exist before the British came. I mean, there was several kingdoms,
Right.
part of a Indian whole, but the India that sort of the Congress wants now, a centralized India that they're talking about, that itself it's become really unacceptable to Muslims.
And do the British see that? So when Congress go back on the partition plan, say it's a matter of interpretation, I guess the British ultimately are the kingmakers here. And do they then see that, well, we can't ignore the Muslim League?
Exactly.
Right. And then they come up with Mountbatten
Because it's
plan.
politically infeasible, isn't it? At the end of the day, if you have all the Muslims united behind the Muslim League, whose staunch position is we can't function with Congress under a united India.
Yeah.
Then they have to take that into consideration.
Exactly, and that's what ultimately is what the Mountbatten plan is. Mountbatten plan says that, and remember, in the middle, there is another sort of thing that happens. There's an interim government that's formed, and in the interim government, there are the Muslim League and the Congress form a united government just before, just after the cabinet mission plan is rejected around October of 1947.
Right.
And in that, the Congress and the Muslim League just don't get along.
Okay.
They just don't get on. They keep fighting. So that's the other sort of factor that plays in heavily. One of the things that they fight about is the allocation of resources. The finance minister is actually from the Muslim League, and he's not allowed to function or at least give his budget. So there is this idea, when he gives the budget, it's seen as too pro-Muslim or pro. So it's actually he comes up. Liaquat Ali Khan is the finance minister. He's the Muslim League finance minister, and he comes up with a budget that taxes businesses, heavily. And Hindus or the Congress sees that as a conspiracy against the Hindus, because Hindus are primarily the business classes of the subcontinent. It was just this idea. Remember, one of the reasons why Pakistan was asked in the first place was because economically, Hindus were, in businesses. Muslims were not. Muslims were, content to being soldiers and farmers, right?
Right.
So that thing ultimately plays its part in sort of convincing everyone that maybe it's not okay to be together. Let's separate.
Okay.
I mean, I'm really interested also in looking at the question of what the view of the second Khalifa was on the issue of federalization and partition, because from what I understand in the Nehru report in 1928, he said that federalization this is 1928, it's very early. He said federalization without safeguards is a death warrant.
Exactly.
For Muslims. And then I think he supported the Lahore plan. And then later on in 1946, he actually he actually rejected the cabinet mission plan. Mirza Bashir ad-Din Mahmud Ahmad. He regarded it as inadequate. And there's a rift somewhat there, you can see, between Jinnah and Mirza Bashir ad-Din Mahmud Ahmad, because Jinnah accepted it. But ultimately, it was the partition plan which proved to be the safeguard for Muslims in India at the time. And I think it's quite, it speaks to, I think there's a lot possibly to be written. There's possibly another book for you to be written to write about the second Khalifa of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community and his relationship to Pakistan, because, at key points, what we've tried to do in this interview to some extent is highlight that there is this figure in the background who keeps in the background because he's a religious figure, and he doesn't want to, especially with his resignation from the All India Kashmir Committee in 1932, he doesn't want to scupper the political process by virtue of people's hatred towards him and his community. But he is extraordinarily politically astute at a very deep level, such that his prescience is, one could say, even leads Jinnah along certain, for example, we've spoken about the need for separate electorates. His rejection of the cabinet mission plan is inadequate at the time. And also his view, even in 1937, from what I understand, he was talking about the future necessity to migrate from Qadian. And as early as 1935, 36, 37, he was telling the Ahmadiyya Muslim community to make sure their passports were in order.
Yeah.
Not just that. So in 1945, 1946, he orders the Jamaat to carry out a survey, and they get this. So there was this Englishman, Spate. This survey of Pakistan, the economic survey of what would be Pakistan. So that becomes sort of the main document that Muslim League later relies on.
So really?
Yeah. So this is another sort of part about. So the Ahmadis community as a whole was planning for Pakistan, and supporting the idea, and was convinced that Pakistan would come much earlier than I think Jinnah was, or
It's almost like what the Khalifa, what he foresaw is what happened, but it's what Jinnah wished wouldn't happen.
Yeah, exactly. Right? That's a great way of putting it.
Jinnah didn't want it to happen, and he fought for it not to happen, but it ended up happening, which is actually remarkable, and it also speaks to Jinnah's character as well. I think it does in a good light in terms of
his desire for unity.
Yeah, his desire for unity. So partition then happens, and Pakistan is founded, and we've seen already that
on the same day as the Yom Masih Maud Day, the foundation of Ahmadiyya. I don't know if you know the foundation. 23rd of March. The foundation day.
That's the Lahore Resolution Day. Yes.
Yeah, it's the same day as it's the foundation day of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. 23rd of March, 1889.
Yeah, the first. Yeah,
is the same day as the foundation of Pakistan. 47, 88.
1940 is 1940 is the resolution.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's on the 23rd of March.
Okay. Okay. Interesting.
So we see that Jinnah's what became Pakistan, and the whole movement behind that was actually being opposed by extremist Muslim elements.
The Kafiri Muslims who wanted to...
The Kafiri Muslim, i.e. those who wish to excommunicate others, who were somewhat sponsored by the Congress, by the Indian Congress in the background. But actually it was kind of the Jinnah's Pakistan versus the extremists. Did that bear out in the initial constitution of Pakistan? Did it bear out in the how did that play out in the religious safeguards of Pakistan as it was originally founded?
Well, originally, of course, Jinnah comes in and he gives his famous speech, the 11th August speech, in which he says that religion has nothing to do with the business of the state, and he talks about religious identities becoming immaterial to sort of nationhood, and he says all of this, Later on, Pakistan's first constitution comes about in 1956. It's a very good constitution, though it names Pakistan an Islamic Republic. So that's, arguably a departure from Jinnah's idea of a secular state. But the constitution itself is pretty much secular.
Yeah.
It talks about equal rights. The prime minister can be a non-Muslim.
Right.
Which is not the case under the present constitution. So there are those safeguards. Things pretty much, Pakistan is, even then the military dictator comes in, but he also is a secular dictator.
Who's that?
Ayub Khan. And he comes up with his constitution, again, the secular constitution, names Pakistan the Republic of Pakistan, changes it from Islamic Republic.
And when was this?
1962.
Okay.
And that's when it shifts from being a prime ministerial to a presidential system.
Yes. And but it is the 1973 constitution when that comes about. One of the major changes that comes about is that the prime minister, the president already was, sort of the head of state was already, the clause was there that they would be Muslims, following the British example where the head of the state has to be of a certain religion. But the head of government, the prime minister, was pretty much anyone could become the prime minister. In 1973, that changes. The prime minister has to be a Muslim alone, can become the prime minister. And at this point, the question of who is a Muslim becomes even more important, you know. And so, of course, that kind of leads to what happens next, you know. The Second Amendment, you know, of course, you know, it starts not just because of that, but there's a whole... Remember, in Pakistan, all of these issues that are created, the religious issues, have a backstory to them. And in this case, the backstory was that whoever planned the riots of 1974 had planned to undermine the government of the then People's Party government. And that leads to the Second Amendment. In 1953, which was 21 years earlier, the same thing happens, you know. Same thing happened. The Muslim League government was in power. They started the anti-Ahmadiyya riots.
They started them. Oh, the Majlis al-Harar and things like that.
Majlis Harar, the party started. And there was, there was this, the chief minister of Punjab, Mumtaz Daultana, tries to use the agitation against Ahmadis as a means to bring down the government in the center. Right. And he succeeds, you know. Khwaja Nazmuddin, who is the prime minister, ultimately his government falls. The demand again is the same: declare Ahmadis non-Muslim and remove Zafrullah Khan from the office of the foreign ministry.
Right.
You know, so that's the demand throughout.
What's I just find it so amazing. I still find it pretty extraordinary that, like, the central political issue in Pakistan since its founding has been Ahmadis. Like, you know, to such that it's bringing down the government, you know, 6 years after its founding. Was it the political acumen and the success of the Ahmadiyya leader that in actual fact was conceived of as a threat in early Pakistan by factions who are opposed to Ahmadiyyat on religious grounds, that they thought this guy is too brilliant, he's too successful, he's too powerful, that we need to make sure that we put in place constitutional safeguards to make sure that he and the like of him from the Ahmadiyya community never are able to take positions of power because we regard them as our religious foes.
That's precisely the issue. I think early on, especially in the first 25 years, the Ahmadi community, because it's an enterprising community, because it's an educated community, it has talented people in it, really surges ahead. I mean, you see, notable Ahmadis who are very talented in positions in the army, in the economic life of the country, in, of course, the foreign minister is Zafrullah Khan. You see Ahmadis, you see their, and this is seen as a growing influence of the Ahmadi Jamaat by the religious clerics, who, by the way, had gone into hiding after the creation of Pakistan, because remember, they had opposed the making of Pakistan.
That reminds me of an individual. So, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, if we look at it from the kind of secular perspective, you have Chaudhry Zafrullah Khan, who's the first foreign minister, who goes on to become the president of the United Nations and head of the International Court of Justice. I think he's the only individual to hold both titles still to this day. You had the founder, the first Pakistani and the first Muslim scientist to win the Nobel Prize, Abdus Salam. Then you also have M.M. Ahmed, who's part of the World Bank. And actually, I find it so interesting that, today in the recent conflict that's been happening between India and Pakistan, the flashpoint which escalated the entire conflict was the threat to end the Indus Basin Waters Treaty, which is, the Indus waters feed both India and Pakistan, and India threatened that they would cut off the water supply, which, would decimate Pakistani agriculture and would be, by all accounts, it would be an existential threat to Pakistan, right? That Indus Basin Waters Treaty was brokered by M.M. Ahmed, an Ahmadi Muslim, as part of the World Bank. And so it's almost like a great fate of irony, actually, that this should be the flashpoint so many years later, when it was an Ahmadi who served his country and enabled the financing to be given from the World Bank to the Pakistani government so that they could participate in this treaty.
Exactly. And also, you would be surprised, some of the biggest dams that were created were the brainchild of M.M. Ahmed.
Really?
Yeah. So, for example, Tarwela Dam, and Mangla Dam, he's the one who played a pivotal role. So even the dams that Pakistan made. So what I'm trying to say is, in those first 25 years or first 27 years of Pakistan, the Ahmadis are really sort of surging ahead, right? I mean, they're making their contributions. They're hugely talented. So Ahmadis are a hugely talented community. That's why, they sort of succeed. And there's a natural, there's an amount of jealousy that, sort of comes about. And that plays its role in this.
And the antagonism comes from religious clerics who they themselves or their forefathers were opposed to the creation of Pakistan.
Exactly. All of them. Yes. And that's a very good point. Let me actually, take this opportunity to talk about it. The Second Amendment, if you look at the voting record.
Can you just tell us, for those who don't know about views, what is the Second Amendment?
Okay, Second Amendment is the amendment to the Pakistani Constitution, which says that Ahmadis, anyone who doesn't believe in the unqualified finality of Prophet Muhammad as the Prophet of Islam, is a non-Muslim for the purposes of law and constitution.
Okay.
And this is...
which is ironic, because we also do believe in the unqualified finality of the Prophet Muhammad. We just interpret it differently.
Yeah, exactly. But they say, when they say
we don't. Yeah.
When they say unqualified, they're like, the official interpretation.
Yeah.
They mean with their qualifications.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's basically, so this Second Amendment, if you look at the people who voted on it, and the people who led it, I mean, you find most of those names, are people who had opposed the creation of Pakistan.
Really?
You've got Mufti Mahmood. Mufti Mahmood was part of the Jamiat-e-Ulama Hind. He opposed the creation of Pakistan. When Pakistan in 1971, Pakistan gets divided into two, when Bangladesh comes into being, Mufti Mahmood famously says, and this is recorded, he says that thank God we were not part of the making of the sin that is Pakistan. That's what he says. So Mufti Mahmood is there. The NAP, which is National Awami Party, it's the left-leaning group, is led by Wali Khan, who's Bacha Khan's son. Now, Bacha Khan and Wali Khan are famously Congress, right? I mean, they're the ones who are the biggest supporters of the Congress party in the then NWFP province, right? Now after partition, they say they're secular, and they take this idea of progressive secular politics. That's what they're working for. At least that's what they say. All of them, the NAP, they all voted for the Second Amendment, which is a complete contradiction of what they'd been taking, the stance, right? The People's Party itself, right? I mean, so what I'm trying to say is these people, People's Party itself had many members. You had the Sumros of Sindh who supported the Second Amendment. So what I'm trying to say is all of these people who declared Ahmadis non-Muslim in 1974, primarily, more or less, I'm sure there must be exceptions, but more or less all of them had opposed the creation of Pakistan.
Right.
So it wasn't just the clerics, it's also the politicians.
Wow. So essentially, Ahmadis were pivotal in producing Pakistan, in creating Pakistan. They were some of the leading figures in early Pakistan. And yet they were the ones who were demonized constitutionally. And the people who demonized them constitutionally were those who were the opponents of the creation of Pakistan.
Exactly. And one of my friends who's, a well-known commentator in Pakistan, he said in one of his interviews he said that the irony is that Pakistan is very much in its genesis an Ahmadi country.
Did he get away with saying
He said it, and all credit to him. He's a very well-known commentator. He's like, and that's the genesis, is, and it's ironic that what Pakistan has done to Ahmadis,
Do you feel that there's hope for Pakistan?
Well, ultimately, yes, on a long enough timeline. But if you're going to look at it's pretty gloomy in the near future, or even, a short-term future we're talking about. Look, we haven't spoken about it, but, the 1974 amendment is not where it ends, right? I mean, it would have been, the Jamaat itself, from what I understand, the Ahmadi community, could have disagreed and said, that look, you consider us non-Muslims, we don't. End of story.
Yeah, you're correct.
Give us equal rights, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
That would have still, sort of worked. Pakistani state went one step ahead. It criminalized the Ahmadi profession of faith. At this point in Pakistan, Ahmadis are not allowed to. So the law is that Ahmadis can't pose to be Muslims. Now that can mean a variety of things, right? Even saying salam can be posing as Muslims. Having a certain name can be posing as Muslims.
Yes, you were mentioning to us that our names would be considered to be potential criminal offences in Pakistan.
Yeah, exactly. So that's happened. That's a recent case. Say, for example, so the question of what design a mosque should be, whether Ahmadis can call their mosque a mosque, or so in Pakistan, if you call an Ahmadi mosque a mosque, you actually can be jailed for 3 years. So you're not supposed to say. So all of that came in. It was sustained by the Supreme Court, even though it goes against, and this is that judgment in 1993 judgment. It's called Zahiruddin versus State, 1993 SCMR 1718. For those who are interested, if there are any lawyers, that judgment upheld the law as being constitutional, even though it went against the very language of the Constitution. The Article 20 of the Pakistani Constitution says that every citizen has the right to profess, practice, and propagate their religion.
Wow,
Gosh,
really?
well, that's directly contrary.
It is entirely contrary, right? But the Supreme Court said that this law is subject. This constitutional provision, this fundamental right, is subject to law. And since there is a law, so it is.
I thought the law was meant to be subject to the Constitution.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the point of a Constitution.
Yeah,
isn't it?
exactly. And it's a
Otherwise, it's just a preference list.
it's just it's a complete misreading, in my opinion, of the Constitution. And so it doesn't stop there either. Fine, they upheld the law. Now the law is being used in very sinister ways. So one of the cases I've been involved in is an appeal against an Islamabad High Court judgment, which holds, and this you would see is how dangerous the situation has become. The High Court judge, his name was Shaukat Aziz Siddiqui, he holds that Ahmadis should have their names on their national ID cards. They should have the word Qadiani or Mirzai added to it. So and so, if so and so, then they would have Qadiani or Mirzai at the end of their name.
And these are pejorative terms, effectively, for Ahmadis.
Exactly, and to basically identify them. That's the reason. Second thing, he says that they should not be allowed in any government service. So any government positions, they should not be.
Does
allowed.
that include things like a government doctor? I mean,
Exactly.
really? So a doctor in a government hospital?
Yeah, so that's the other part of his judgment. And this is, so I mean, these are bad enough, but this gets even worse. He says that they should be made to wear clothes that are different from Muslims. When I raised this, so the court,
He wanted branded clothing of...
So
He's trying to brand them. That's a good word. He's trying to brand
That's he wants us to wear like Ahmadi on our clothing.
Yeah, well, he wants clothes that are not worn by Muslims.
What does that even mean? I mean,
Yeah,
Essentially,
exactly.
it's criminalizing every aspect of life for Ahmadis so that they could be so that they could be treated as criminals.
Exactly. So that's what this law has led to. Right
and
now.
what is this? So this law is to tell us a little about. This is a judgment. This is an appeal. This is going through the appeal courts currently.
It is in appeal. This judgment is. The law itself is 1984 Ordinance 20, which introduced 298B and C to the Pakistan Penal Code. This is appeal, and when I was, when we presented, my co-counsel and I, when we presented this judgment to the division bench, they started laughing, really, as anyone would, They were like, what are they supposed to wear? What is it that Muslims don't wear? But, it's just how terrible the situation is. What I want to say here, we've been talking about other stuff, and I, as a Pakistani, I hate to be negative about Pakistan, but what is going on in this country right now, in Pakistan, I mean, not this country, Pakistan right now is a systematic cultural, social, political, and physical genocide of the Ahmadi community. And I have no qualms about using the word genocide for it, because it fits the definition of genocide as given under the Genocide Convention. So there are people killed, but that's not all. This is a systematic erasure of the Ahmadi community from Pakistan, and it's going on. And it's, even if the government is not doing it directly, and that's a question, whether it isn't, it probably isn't. But it is definitely, it is unwilling to stop it, and just another example. I mean, the Ahmadi, or I can't even call it a mosque in Pakistan, so the Ahmadi places of worship, if they have minarets, those minarets have been, so the mullahs say that those minarets are, Islamic, so they shouldn't be on.
They're imitating mosques.
They're imitating mosques.
Even though I think minarets came from the...
Exactly.
I think it was Constantinople. Am I wrong in that? Maybe I'm wrong in that. Constantinople, perhaps. Or certainly Muslims didn't... I don't think they invented minarets.
Exactly, they didn't. And, you've got... a picture of the Kaaba, Kaaba doesn't have any minarets.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So, it's just, but that's, and then there was a judgment of the Lahore High Court, which was a very positive judgment. It said, fine, but any places of worship built before 1984 are not subject to demolition just because they have minarets, because, they were made before the law came in, and there's no retrospective application. But nobody, there's no, they've been destroying and they've been demolishing minarets and places of worship all over Punjab, and now in other provinces as well. So what I'm trying to say is that there's a systematic erasure, and people should talk about it,
Right. Can I ask, so often I've seen in comment sections on videos relating to Ahmadi persecution, you'll have Pakistanis to say, look, this is overblown, and actually all minorities in Pakistan suffer, and Ahmadi Muslims are just one community among minorities that are suffering. So how would you respond to somebody saying something like that?
I don't agree. I think, yes, of course, there's, so there are other communities that suffer from discrimination. Say, for example, the Christians or the Hindus, and then Hindus face, in Sindh, they faced other issues like, forced conversions and that sort of thing. That is all true. But the legal sort of, justification for persecution only exists for Ahmadis, It's not just this law, just so that Ahmadis pretty much can't vote in Pakistan. They're disenfranchised because in order to vote, they have to declare themselves non-Muslims, Right. And not just that, even if they didn't have to, everyone in Pakistan, from Hindus, Christians, Muslims, whatever denomination of Muslims, Sikhs, everyone is on one electoral list, except the Ahmadis.
Really?
Ahmadis have a separate list.
Really?
It's called non-Muslim supplementary list. Only has Ahmadis on it.
So, but the other non-Muslims, well, we're not non-Muslim, but the others whom they consider to be non-Muslims, Hindus, Christians, they're not on the non-Muslim list.
They're on the
same list as the Muslims.
Yes.
Wow, that's strange.
That is strange, and that is, and the reason they say that is because they want to distinguish, because Ahmadis have Muslim names, so, this is the way to distinguish, but it makes no logical sense to me. It makes no logical sense. So what I'm trying to say is Pakistan, just to go back to Jinnah and sort of, obviously when Jinnah opposed, sort of this expulsion of the Ahmadis from the Muslim League and the Muslim community, he saw these constitutional implications, the constitutional implications. And, he saw also the fact that, it wouldn't stop with the Ahmadis anyway.
So it's the genie let out the bottle.
Exactly.
And he was a kind of like a wall, it seems, holding it back.
Exactly.
And then when he died, when Jinnah died, 53, very quickly on, you had the Majlis Ahrar the fire riots with the firebombing of Ahmadi homes and mosques and things. And then that just built up steam up to the 1974 constitutional amendment.
Yeah.
So it's basically like he was kind of, in a way, a wall protecting the rights of minorities in general.
He's protecting Pakistan itself.
That's what I mean.
From the
minorities in Pakistan, from the extremists. But the extremists, in a way, their pedigree goes back all the way back to 1919 Khilafat movement, is what you're saying. And then from them, the Majlis-e-Ahrar. And so that all in itself stemmed from a long history of developing extremism in the 19th century in response to the British, which is something, for example, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad alayhi salam, the founder of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, wrote about very eloquently in his book, The British Government and Jihad, where he explained the Islamic position. So a lot of this actually comes out from a...
And the takfir comes from the excommunication aspect comes especially from the development of the founding of the Ahmadiyya Muslim Jamaat as well.
Yeah.
That's when this takfir taste develops in particular, and in particular against the Ahmadis, and then continues.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's just so interesting that this is, in a way, Pakistan is a symptom of a series of theological and social issues that go back to the 19th century.
Exactly.
And it's now passed through the 20th century. So now we're going into the middle of the 21st century almost. We're a quarter of the way through it. And Pakistan is suffering more than anything because of these issues.
But the beautiful thing that I find about it, which may sound strange to mention after all this, is that actually in its actual foundation, Pakistan has a beautiful foundation. It has a foundation which is essentially secular, which is there for the protection of minorities. And even though it was sort of set up as with the name of an Islamic republic, actually it understood that Islam as being one which gives rights to everybody. And for me, and this is a theological interpretation, this is what original Islam preached, because this is how the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, governed Medina. He allowed different people to be governed by, according to essentially their rules, the rules that they chose, and allowed for representation in that way, and allowed for each people to be given their rights. And like you said, as to the question of who is a Muslim, he said, write down for me anyone who calls themselves a Muslim.
Yeah.
So the Jinnah's Pakistan actually seems to be a Muslim Pakistan. And the subsequent extremism and intolerance that has entered into Pakistan is actually a departure from Islam. Are those your feelings as well? You don't have to endorse them. But
No, I endorse them completely. I think definitely, when you talk about, things in Pakistan, just so that I was talking to someone earlier, and I know it's kind of off topic, but I think I should mention it here, just to give you an understanding of where we're at in Pakistan. There's so many beautiful stories that one learns about the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, sort of in one's lifetime, in sort of when one's a child and stuff. One of them is that, he used to throw, there was this woman who used to throw rubbish on him, and he would go, when she fell ill, he went and sort of looked after her and stuff. That's one of the stories, right? And one of the Waqiyat, as it were. And the other one is, of course, that when the Christians came to Medina and they needed a place to pray, the Prophet opened the Masjid al-Nabawi to them.
The mosque.
Right? Yeah. And the extremists in Pakistan, this is the new narrative. And we're talking about the TLP, which is Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan, which is an extremist Brelvi group, as you might know. They've now started a campaign saying that both these stories are false.
Oh, really?
Really?
And they should be expunged because they're against Islam.
Gosh.
So
that's historical revisionism, isn't it?
Exactly. So that's where we're at in terms of, how we're looking at Islam. We have this, so people have this intolerant idea of Islam, which is, remember, for Jinnah, and as for anyone who's looking at this idea, one of the things that Jinnah repeatedly said was that this idea of democracy, an equality of brotherhood of mankind, regardless of what faith they are, is a central Islamic principle.
Really?
This is what Jinnah said. he said, when we talk about Islamic, so, because he had spoken of a secular state on his 11th August speech, and, remember, Pakistan didn't even become an Islamic Republic till much later. But one of the when he spoke of a secular state, he came under, immediate criticism from people. They're like, you're talking about a secular state, but you were promising us a Muslim state, And that's when he said, Islam and its idealism have taught us democracy, and taught us. So this idea was there, this positive idea of Islam, I feel that over the last 30 odd years, 40 odd years, we've lost that idea to an extent where even those who, so it's not just, so on the one hand, there are those extremists who reject these established stories of the Prophet's life, which are, we talk about inclusion and pluralism, in my opinion. But there are also in Pakistan sort of now how do I put it? I don't want to sort of, so atheists and, agnostics and all of them, of course, everybody has the right to believe what they want. One has straddled belief and disbelief, so that's not, I don't hold that against them. But they also basically look down upon anyone who says that Islam stands for democracy or equal rights and stuff.
Right.
Because there's this, so we've got these two extremes who are like, one is almost Islamophobic. And the other one is like, it wants to see Islam as this narrow mind. They agree on this,
Right. And in a way, the atheistic Islamophobic position may very well be a reaction to the extremist position.
Exactly.
Over time, is the children of those extremists rebel against the older generation's extremism and seeing the harm that is done to their own society.
Right.
And so Pakistan is caught between these two extremes.
Really.
And that's the biggest problem with Pakistan, And so that, in my opinion, this ideological confusion leads to is an existential threat to the very idea of Pakistan, I think.
And in the middle of these two extremes, you do have the original Pakistan of Jinnah, and which was supported by the Ahmadis as being moderate, pluralistic, granting freedom of religion, freedom of conscience. But this was later hijacked. But the foundation, I do want to come back to this, is the foundation of Pakistan was quite beautiful.
It was, yes.
And can I, you've mentioned these two extremes, and the Ahmadis are caught in the middle of those two extremes practically today. My final question is, how do you feel, what is their relationship with Pakistan? So about Ahmadis in Pakistan, I know you're not speaking for them as such, but what is your perception of, how do they see Pakistan? Are they patriotic for Pakistan? Are they anti-Pakistan? What is their relationship like with Pakistan, even in the midst of this persecution?
You see, this is extraordinary, the patriotism that one sees, the patriotic impulse of the Ahmadis towards Pakistan, in sort of the way they come to its defense. Wow. And Ahmadis are fighting on the front lines. So the contribution of Ahmadis to, Pakistan's progress, stability, and in defense as well, despite the persecution, is amazing. I mean, Atif Mia was willing to leave everything in, Princeton and all his work and go work for Pakistan, It's a shame that we didn't, in Pakistan didn't allow that. So Ahmadis, whenever there's a, sort of a cry for help from Pakistan, Ahmadis are the first ones to respond. It's amazing. I just find it, the love that Ahmadis have for the Pakistan as a whole is not just, it's not just very, very touching. Of course it is. But it's also, it stands in sharp contrast to what other communities, and I'm not going to, sort of say that other communities are bad, but generally speaking, there are people in Pakistan with fewer grievances, much less so than Ahmadis, who are willing to sort of just basically stab the country in the back,
Right.
And because they've I'm sure, legitimate grievances, but never from the Ahmadis. None of this.
I think that's partly because people don't really understand, but the relationship that Ahmadis have to Pakistan is the love that is there is born out actually of their love of their Khalifas, and at least in part, because the knowledge that our second Khalifa believed in the vision of Pakistan and believed in the necessity of it, and worked tirelessly in many separate domains over decades to, for the causes of Kashmir, for bringing back Jinnah back from his self-imposed exile in England, for example, as we've discussed, bringing the All-Muslim League to the pole position in the Punjab through convincing the independent Liberal Party, I think you mentioned.
The Unionist Party.
The Unionist Party to stand down and let the Muslim League rule there. Over decades, he had concerted effort for a vision of Pakistan and for the needs of the rights of Muslims. It means that as Ahmadis, we are inexorably tied to that country. We can't let it go because actually it's
in our DNA.
It's related to our respect and our love of our Khalifa. And that is the fundamental to our identity as Ahmadi Muslims. And so if he believed in the necessity of it, who are we to gainsay that, right? And so we just pray that the prayers that he did for Pakistan, and that's what people don't really understand or realize, and the prayers that the Khulafa have done
and continue to do for Pakistan, the third Khalifa, what he went through, especially in the 1973, 1974 court cases and coming up before the Pakistan Assembly, then the suffering that our fourth Khalifa went through in having to leave his beloved homeland, right, and never be able to return to it. And then our current Khalifa, who, loves Pakistan dearly, but again has not been able to return to it because he's now a Khalifa of the Ahmadi Muslim community. And was previously imprisoned for his faith.
And was imprisoned for his faith in Pakistan. Pakistan doesn't realize perhaps that, the benefit of their prayers for that country is perhaps one of the main things that's kept that country going, in my humble view. And as Ahmadi Muslims, you talk about the patriotism of Ahmadis, I can say 100% it has a religious aspect for us because of our love and reverence for our Khulafa.
Yeah, and even now the Khalifa is constantly at the end of his Friday sermons exhorting all Ahmadis across the world to pray for Pakistan and to pray for the persecution to stop, but also to pray for the nation as a whole.
Yeah.
The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said that you should help both the oppressor and the oppressed. And the companion said, we know how to help the oppressed. We understand what that means. How do you help the oppressor? And you say, try and get him to stop, to stay his hand, to stop him partaking in the oppression itself. So this is the milk of sympathy that runs from the callus of the Ahmadi Muslim community, and that runs through all Ahmadi Muslims. So of course our prayers are with Pakistan, always will be with Pakistan. Of course our prayers are also with the whole of humanity as well. That we're seeking peace for everyone, no matter what religious background they have or none, whatever culture they come from. But in particular, our prayers are for the Muslims of the world, and
because perhaps it's one of the very few countries that was ever founded for the purpose of religious freedom.
Mm.
Exactly, and that's the irony, right?
Any final words?
Thank you so much for doing this. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and I hope it will be of use to people, your listeners as well.
God willing. Well, thank you very much, Yasser Sahib, for coming and for sharing your huge amount of knowledge and insight and wisdom with respect to these topics. Your book, Jinnah, A Life, is something I'm reading through now. Brilliant book, really good. I wish there was an audiobook. Maybe I should record it for you because I really like it. But I really recommend that people read that. And you have a previous book, Jinnah, Myth and Reality. Is there anywhere else where people can find your work or find out more about you?
I've written for a few newspapers and stuff, and sort of, so that I think, so Friday Times and the print, and
we'll collate links and we'll put them in the description box below, both to your books and also to your works generally.
Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you to those of you at home watching. Please do like, comment and subscribe. Peace be upon you, and we'll see you in the next one.